Hi, I'm Oliver Lennon, and welcome to the Syndeo Podcast, where we delve into all things conversational AI with some of the sharpest brains from some of the most innovative companies in the world of customer experience. Um, these are not a series of interviews, but conversations, regular discourse designed to provoke, educate, and enlighten the business professionals with insights, learning, and guidance on leveraging conversational AI to deliver meaningful CX. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Merijn. Booij. Merijn is, you're not mind me saying, an industry veteran, has been working in the space for 20 plus years with one of the leading vendors in the space, Genesys, covering various roles, CMO, product evangelist, currently GM and EVP of the WM division. Delighted, some really great conversations with Merijn, covering everything from empathy and AI and where that is going to take us, right through to how AI will be used from agent assist. Wonderful conversation, brilliant insight. Listen out for the Barbie story as well. Welcome, Merijn, Booij.
Thank you.
Pretty sure I've got that pronunciation right. I've tried it over the last 15 years. I'm not Dutch, but you can correct me.
I've heard worse and I've heard better. Let's put it like this. You need to be native Dutch to be able to pronounce it correctly. So I forgive everybody on the globe how they pronounce it and what they do with it. So in Spain, they call me Gurgur, which is the furthest away from my original name I think you can get. So anything between that and the original pronunciation is totally fine with me. But it's Merijn Booij.
Merijn Booij. Merijn, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you. We've known each other for quite a few years in different guises. I know you've been in this contact center technology space for a long time. But my first, I suppose, obviously having known you and reading through a little bit, what is a trained lawyer in international war, or the law of war, I think it is, doing as a CX junkie?
Yeah, it's a good question. I have answered it many times in a different way, I guess, as well. I ended up in the niche world of the law of war, which suddenly now is kind of interesting. But when I graduated in the early 90s, it wasn't that cool at all. And I had a hard time actually finding employment in it. And most of the employment that I was looking for was very bureaucratic and very cubicle focused for a couple of research decades. And then hopefully you pop out somewhere. And I was 24, 25. I was eager to put my stamp on the world, and didn't sound very appealing. So I decided to back out of that. I joined the army, and in the army, suddenly my education that I had became relevant when I started combining it with the work they asked me to do, which was running a technical project, which was focused on transporting wounded soldiers into a mesh hospital, and from a mesh hospital back to the country where they should be treated in a hospital. And I was going from completely manual to a very technical approach, at that time at least, with QR or barcode scanning and stuff like that. And I loved that. So when I came out of the army, I decided I'm going to work in a technology front or environment where I can start thinking about innovation. And so I, at that time, like you did, sent letters to people that had the same education as I did. Not that many, actually. I found two. Both of them were CEOs, and one of them answered my email or my letter and said, yeah, why don't you come by? And after some talking, I became a trainee at his company, or at the company that he worked for. And I got the charge to build a contact center. And so because you're kind of young, savvy, we can get rid of you if you don't do it well. So I started walking the path of building a contact center from scratch. And that was at the ANWB in the Netherlands, the Road Assistance Organization. And I did that for about 5 years, and we were super innovative. So I still remember with the group of people that we worked with, is that everything was possible. And so throughout that journey, I became the contact center manager for part of it. And then I realized running a contact center at that time is like walking a field of landmines. So finally, my specialization in understanding in the use of landmines in law and the rules of war became relevant. Incredibly bad metaphor, I guess, but that's how we connected. So that being said, I think that when you do law in the Netherlands, it's super academic. You get trained to, it's almost like a half MBA that you do, and you see them everywhere, right? So Dutch lawyers pop up everywhere in business situations, and even on the edge of technology. And I learned through doing that I love the innovation element of it, the element of being wrong every once in a while about future and trends that you see, but also to do something that nobody's ever done before and get it right. And at that time at that company, we had a speech IVR in 1996, which was from a language understanding perspective way too early, but we had a ton of fun with it. We only ran it for 24 hours, then we took it down again because it was not good enough. But later on, we got better and better at it, and we ran it. And I think we were the first European company that had a speech-based IVR for self-service applications. We did chat in 1998. We had like 5 chats a year, and mostly people that were curious about this button on their website, and they clicked on it, and then suddenly they hit an agent. And there was panic in the contact center because, we have a chat, so who's going to answer it? Good times, for sure.
You're not giving away your age, actually. Just, I don't know if you know this, you and I, within a day, you're a day older than I, actually. We're both Capricorns.
Ah, right.
Yeah. Right. That's the power of social media networks. I'm not sure which one we're connected on, but
I didn't know you were 39, man. So that's young.
I'm not going to ask who looks the youngest. I think we've both aged gracefully. Let's put it like that, Merijn. You're currently EVP GM of the WEM business in Genesys, but you've held quite a few roles in Genesys. You're back in the Netherlands now, and I know you spent quite a few years in San Francisco. You've been doing CMO, you've run product. I remember you speaking at a number of G-Force events talking about innovation. In the space that we are seeing now, we'll come back to some of those. There's obviously a lot of, in the last 6, 8, 10 weeks, interest both at consumer and the business level in ChatGPT. Is this in your, you've been through a lot of this, you've seen, is this the real thing, do you think? Is this something that's going to shake up the industry, or is this another one of the inflated hype cycles that we're at?
It certainly will shake up the industry. And I'll go back a couple of years. I think in 2016 or so, on one of those conferences, I presented a Barbie that was supported by an AI library.
I recall that story, yes.
It's like 7, 8 years ago. And most people in that room at that time thought it was crazy. And why are we talking about a Barbie that has AI and you can have a conversation with? And for me, the conclusion was that if that is possible in a children's toy today, then there's no reason that AI will not enter my household. And if that happens, there's no reason it would not enter the workspace, right? And I think when we look back at that, it happened in an avalanche kind of way with a lot of bad practices, by the way, resulting from it. But it's there to stay and it's not going to go away. And I think ChatGPT is just the next evolution of that. If I see my kids, by the way, trying to use it for their homework and for the Sinterklaas poems that we write here in the Netherlands, I asked it to write me a WEM strategy. And WEM, by the way, for the people that are interested in acronyms, is Workforce Engagement Management. So all the tool set that you would require to actually operate your contact center. I asked it to write a business strategy for Genesys for WEM. And I was kind of stunned by what I got out of it, right? So it's not smarter than we are, but it will help me articulate stuff that I would spend time on writing in like a second. So I was kind of impressed with what it does, and sitting on the speech and text analytics side within WEM, we certainly see a role for ChatGPT-like environment going forward, and already looking at integrating and elements like that. So no, I think it's not a hype cycle. I think it's part of the AI avalanche that we're all living. And it will help us to create an environment in which I think customer experience can be much better. And that's what we should drive with it.
I was going to delve into that Barbie story. If I recall rightly, you were caught going through the airport by security with a Barbie.
I was, yeah. Actually, the production company in the final minute offered me an actual speaking Barbie. So when I walked on stage, I had the actual thing from Mattel. But when I left home, I was scurrying through the house to find one of my daughter's Barbies, just to take there as a prop. And after searching for about an hour, I found one in my son's room, which he cut the hair off and lit it on fire and undressed. And I put that in my suitcase just in case I'll get some clothing at an airport toy store or whatever. And then I went through TSA, and TSA opened my luggage, and they were already laughing, so they were clearly focused on. And one of the guys took out this naked Barbie and raised it. Said, "Whose is this?" In a full TSA room, and yeah, a lot of people looked at me. Okay, that's awkward to say the least. So, but yeah, that happened.
Yeah. Flipping back into the ChatGPT and with your, I don't know if you can put your lawyer's brain back on again. I was chatting to someone recently about this. An analogy I used was like the Wild West going back to maybe 15 years in the world of open source. Every company, or maybe 20 years, was using open source, and then it started to be a lot of discussion around IP and ownership. If you go into the ChatGPT world, do you see some of that coming up as well, or what do you think around that aspect of it? Or have you any thoughts at all on it?
You mean we would go back, or what?
No. So, you mentioned you went into ChatGPT and you asked to write a GM strategy for you, or I know lots of organizations are using it for maybe off code or more, writing blogs or on the artistic side. So are we going to get into this discussion of who actually owns the IP? Is it belonging to the language model? Is it the person who asks questions?
Yeah, it's a good question. Microsoft would like to own it, as we've all seen their behavior on the market already. I think it is a certain level of these breakthroughs will happen in parallel, and I don't think this will be the only one, right? I don't think there's a unique environment that has now been created that could not be replicated, or will not have a second one that's maybe even better, or evolution that happens elsewhere. So I would hope that the IP will be, well, maybe not open source, but be available to a lot of people, and also a lot of parts of our society, because I think it can benefit many more people than just a business owner or a large software enterprise like a Microsoft or even Genesys, right? It will give you an edge for a while, but I think that the benefit that it could bring to a lot of societal layers is much bigger. Education, and a lot of people think education will now be stopped or canceled or whatever. But I actually think it will benefit education if you find the proper way of using these elements, right? Is it not the kid that needs to understand the logic and the analysis and the ability to add value to a piece that is written by a system like that? Is that not more important than the ability to just read and write something fairly straightforward? I think it is. Are there not use cases thinkable when you think about the scarcity of employment right now, in which this could help to find different ways to have people do other things, actually maybe things that they like to do instead of things that they need to do right now? So I think there's a ton of benefits that could come out of it as well. And of course, the biggest benefit is that you don't need any lawyers anymore. So because that will completely be replaced. I'm joking here, but there are certain elements that will be replaced fairly quickly, and I think that's a good thing. As long as we don't underestimate the power that the human can still bring to this domain, right? And if you've followed me a little bit, I've always been preaching about augmentation between these two worlds, and as long as that happens, then I think it will be beneficial to us, and it will be beneficial to a large group of people. And I think that is really important to realize. It will also help like continents like Africa, which are incredibly quickly aging leadership, but very young population, to become somewhat of a development innovation hub for the future of the world. I think those are all good things that will benefit everybody on this planet.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess bringing it back around to the contact center space and then the agent discussion around that, again, there's been a lot of, obviously it's been in the industry for a while. Is AI going to replace the agent? Automation, is that going to do away with everything else? There's been all sorts of statistics around. I think we even noticed one from Gartner around like 46 billion savings by 2026 or something because of AI. I mean, again, how do you see that playing out? That kind of augmentation. I think in Genesys, you call it blended AI. I don't know if we still call it that, but that's the term.
We did for a while, yeah. So I think that the initial use case was very focused on automating text-based conversations, right? And which is, I think, somewhat simple and not necessarily the ultimate use that you could get from systems like that or capabilities like that. I think there are a number of problems that are happening right now in the world of customer experience specifically that I think are going to be helpfully resolved by augmenting people and AI, ML-like capabilities. And a big part of that is because on the one side, the number of events or interactions that an enterprise has to deal with is going to increase. The same analyst firm, Gartner, predicted that will increase more than 3 times compared to the 2020 numbers. And this was pre-COVID. No CFO in their right mind will say, well, okay, we'll hire 3 times more people. That's not going to happen, besides the fact that you probably won't find 3 times more people to enlist, right? In the contact center land, we've always been very good in onboarding large quantities of people, train them very quickly, get them in a seat, and then kind of hope that they would stay on for somewhat of a period so that we can leverage them for a year, maybe 2 years. We've never been very good in retaining those people, making those agents relevant and making those agents really focus on why we hired them in the first place. And I think that capabilities like AI, conversational AI, and machine learning allow us to finally look at the population we have, that we pay well, I hope, that we train well, that we would like to keep within our domain because they're great in customer engagement, finally start doing what they're supposed to be doing, which is engaging with the customers that need that human helping hand. And I think there's plenty of those still around, right? So yeah, we will be very successful in automating simple queries. We will get better and better in doing the average query. And we'll get better in doing especially large volumes of a similar complex query. Doesn't mean that you won't need humans, right? So people will communicate more and more and more. There will be more sensory derived information coming into your enterprise. There will always be situations where a human just adds more value. That could be because of the skills that we bring to the table. Like people talk a lot about empathy, but also don't forget humor and irony and sarcasm and the ability to sell in many different ways compared to a bot or a machine that you're confronting with. So I think there's many use cases where the human will actually be relevant. The question is, how do we find the customer that we then connect with the right source of information, right? Is it the bot or is it a human? Is it an outsourced agent? Is it a gig economy based agent? But those are the questions that are actually, I think, more relevant to answer than whether AI or conversational AI will be there in the future. As a period, it will be. And it will shape and create form for itself, and it will become more relevant, and it will learn how to do empathetic statements. But an AI bot will never hit his little toe on a doorstop and cry for pain. So when I tell you I broke my toe on a doorstop, you can probably say, yeah, I know what you feel, right? You can place yourself in my context. And that will be super difficult for a bot to do because it's a trained skill, right? They can stay the statement of empathy, but they're not really being able to place themselves in my context. So I think that's kind of a step that we need to figure out what that really means and where does this human then fit, right? I also believe that a conversation could start very well with a bot that does the conversation until a moment in time where logic tells us, hey, it's better now to hand this over to a human because we require a certain level of human skill. And maybe not. So that's the question decisioning that I think will change CX forever.
Yeah, and do you just, thinking about empathy, well, your view on this, do you ever actually think AI will have empathy, or will it have an understanding of when to express empathy? And I think those are 2 different things. As a human, most of us should have empathy, and most of us should understand when to express. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm not going to say no to that question, right? So will there ever be a AI system that is able to have empathy? Yeah, probably. I'm just not sure when and what shape and form that will take. Will an AI system be able to realize when statements of empathetic utterances are relevant and will mean something to a customer? For sure. So they can absolutely emulate empathy in their conversation. I have no doubt about it. We're getting better in it already. But they also get it wrong very easily, right? So where humans don't get it wrong, at least not that I've known of, or you must be completely off the North Pole and have never talked to a person. I don't think a human will get it wrong when somebody tells something terrible. The worst thing that we can do with a human is to actually constrain him by script and follow that script, even if an empathetic utterance is actually required because you feel pretty rotten about what your customer just told you. I'll never forget in the early days of COVID, I was listening into a call. This customer calls in and it says, I've got I wrapped my Mustang around a tree, and this is my Mustang from 1966. And if you lived in the US, that's a really expensive treasure to have. He restored it by hand for about 15 years, and then he took it out for a spin. And I could, in the second or third day of driving it around, he crashed it and wrapped it around a tree, and it was totaled. So he calls in, he's crying on the phone, and the first thing the agent says, "What's your zip code?" And I think that's what a bot would do, right? So that's not what a human would do. And so if you remove the constraint of script, the human will probably say, "Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that." Right? Not that I maybe put my own Mustang against a tree, but I probably had some loss, right? I had some material loss, maybe had a car accident. So you kind of feel where this person is sitting, right? That's the humanness of the skill set that we bring to the table. And I don't think that will be replaced shortly. And the question is even whether you really want to do that, right? So why not have humans to focus on those queries and those questions? Because I think that the result, the outcome, will always be somewhat predictable and guaranteed. And I think I like that as a operator of a contact center environment.
Just on that, and I was, as you were chatting there, I was thinking, how much of that do you think, that response that the agent provided enough time, how much of that is actually down to the organization, i.e. the contact center training and the coaching? Because the same applies in the tech world, and how much of it actually applies to the ability to do it. So I think the agent were coached properly in that world, they will be empathetic. And the same in the tech, if you implement it correctly, it can respond. But ultimately, a lot of the contact center, and in my view, the model hasn't changed for 30 years. It's still around low cost, high volume, and stack them up, sell them cheap.
Yeah.
What do you?
Yeah, you're right. So I think as I said, we had a speech IVR and a chat implementation in the 90s, and it took another 15, maybe almost 20 years to get somewhere across the hype cycle on these two capabilities, right? And chat has been around for ages, by the way. Video calling is still a bit of a niche and very focused on skill set differences like doctor, patient, private banker, and I find that somewhat surprising that hasn't gone further. And this has been around since the 30s, the 1930s. So that's almost 100 years of video calling technology-wise being able. We still manage a lot of stuff in the contact center on the same KPIs that I used to manage my contact center on, right? And I've been almost every presentation, I talk about the fact that service level doesn't mean anything from a contact customer perspective. It means a lot from a planning perspective, but from a customer perspective, it means squat. And proof has been abound that if you have a customer wait a little bit longer, but you help him the first time around, instead of putting him on hold or transferring that person, your outcome will be better. And still that happens all the time. I had an experience with an American bank recently, and I have a complex query that can't be self-serviced. I know that. Must have talked to 6-7 people in that bank. Right, and that is a bank that's using technology that I know quite well. So they should be able to do a better job on getting me to the right spot in a much quicker way. These things are still happening, and technology has been around them and all these people that implement CX for quite some time to do a better job, a simpler job, a more customer-focused job, and so it's a bit of a it's a bit of a complaint from a technology usage perspective, right? So you buy this great technology, then leverage this great technology. Don't try to kind of lift and then replace everything you already had with the same thing, because you're not going to progress yourself. You're not going to be better in customer experience. And I think that's something that we and you and people that have been around in this industry for quite some time own this, right? We need to help customers understand and see what the future could be like, how they could operate. Sometimes you need to take a risk to be better at what you really do. I think it's about time, because the technology now is so mature that you can start focusing on reducing the headcount that you have and focus them on the human part of your domain. As long as you don't separate yourself in silos internally, as long as you don't see the outsource as a different world, if you bring it all together and you start thinking about this as a holistic mass of resourcing capabilities that you have, suddenly you start making a plan on how to engage with your customers, which is much more opportune for your customers. And I think we're on the edge of that step. And I think in this decade, we'll make that step. That being said, I thought a lot of stuff that would happen in 2020, which never happened. But I do think that now we're getting better. There's more professional people in our industry. There's an influx of people that actually understand AI and machine learning, are not afraid of it, work with it for ages. And that will only increase the use cases. That will only increase the feasibility of leveraging it everywhere, right? We see more and more applications that are suite-wide, enterprise-wide, than just these little bespoke things that always end up in a little silo of their own. And so I think we're making good progress on that side of the house. And I've got good faith that in between now and 2030, we will see the first ones where humans are actually literally only talking to humans when it is really required. Because that for me is the ultimate situation that you can land in from a human to a self-service domain.
Yeah, I mean, again, and maybe come on to your 30 for 30, because I know you used to have a 20 for 20, I think you called it.
Yeah.
But a lot of the technology, you know, be that cloud, be that async messaging, it has been here for a number of years, but still the adoption rate is pretty abysmal. So what, 70% of contact center seats are still on-prem or not in the cloud or thereabouts. The uptake on Apple Business Messaging or WhatsApp isn't what we all thought 3 or 4 years ago.
Right.
But the consumer is driving it. So I'm just kind of, what's your thoughts on that space? Is that because there's no value to it? Is that because the contact center organizations cannot change their way of operation to actually take advantage of that? Or
a little bit of all of the above, right? So I think that the contact center domain and especially the operation of it, it's a bit of a status quo like business. I feel is that people that are operating those actually don't like change all that much because they found a kind of a way to operate this to get the results that they would like. And I think that hope sometimes is a big element of that. I hope tomorrow will be fine. And hence they're kind of reluctant to change the things that they do. There's a lot of time that we go and work with customers around workforce management, so resource management, or the way that we do performance management, or letting go of certain KPIs, that you feel pushback, right? So people are reluctant to onboard that, and change management becomes incredibly critical in allowing customers to go through this phase of transformation and take them by the hand to get to this final step, this final station. So that's one. I think that that COVID actually helped us a little bit because it did accelerate cloud thinking, right? So cloud suddenly was this always was surrounded by security issues and scale issues. And I think that if you now look at where security issues mostly happen, it's actually on-prem or in a single tenant hosted environment versus cloud. There's so much at stake for companies like us, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, to get this right, that we spent a ton of energy and investment in making sure we get it right. And I'm happy to say we do, right? So we're very proud of the way that we're operating this. So this slowly starts disappearing, so that will help us to drive it forward as well. Technology is getting better and technology is getting simpler to use. And I think that customers are learning that sophistication is not the right answer to customer experience. The ability for you to simplify what you're actually trying to do so you can learn from what you're doing and then add layers of additional things that you want to do is something that is finding a hearing audience now and listening audience in the customer base as well. So that's helping too. But there's still things, you mentioned 2020, right? So there's still things that didn't happen either, right? So for instance, I thought that messaging would actually be bigger than voice. And you're right, it isn't. And what we actually saw happening in COVID is that we did see much more self-service, but we also saw an incredible increase in voice. And it's still there. And it's weird because I don't like calling contact centers and my kids don't like calling. So who are those people that are calling contact centers? There are people that need help. Those are people that need confirmation of change. There are people that want to make sure, right? But there's still this layer of, I want to talk to a person to make sure I got it right, to make sure I understand this, or the energy prices in the Netherlands are sky high. So people on the 1st of January had to give their new readings. It was crazy. Everybody did it on the phone. That was a great self-service app. I used the self-service app, worked fantastically well. The hold times and the wait times in the contact center of these energy or these utility companies was crazy high. So you wonder why that is. None of them, though, used WhatsApp, for instance, which is the dominant messaging channel, I think, in the Netherlands. I was a bit surprised by that. So WhatsApp is such an easy way I communicate with my kids, with my parents on WhatsApp. Why not with an enterprise, right? And I think one of the main reasons is that the unpredictability of the volume is scaring enterprises away from it a little bit. So as soon as you open it, it's like the doors are off, right? And
Pandora box.
Yeah, people would expect 24-hour service and stuff like that. I don't think it will go that fast. Because I think the beauty of WhatsApp actually is that you can post something, and there's a time delay that I would accept depending on the urgency of the message that I post, I think. And the beauty of what we do in the routing world is that you can analyze what the message is and define how urgent is this. Again, AI. So AI is very able to dictate a time in which we should answer this. It also then allows me to toggle around with this volume, right? So, hey, I need to get this to a human. I've got about an hour, because then I think that the patient's threshold will be over. So I need to find a human within that period of time. And that's what routing, that's what Genesys has always done really, really well. At the early days, we called that a universal queue. But that's what you want to have, and the ability to kind of mix and match that so that you don't get overwhelmed by your messaging traffic, because you could. And it's hard to see the difference between one and the next conversation. Is there any closure to a conversation, right? So you have to ask a typical question that you rather avoid to make sure you understand, hey, we've helped this customer, it's now over. Because 2 days later, I could pick up the same thread and start talking again. And those are things that I think that some of them are kind of scared about, and then on top of that you get the security question, right? So I have WhatsApp, but I can't do any CRM related things on WhatsApp because it's in front of my firewall, it's not protected, it's not secure. So those are questions as well that are popping up, and that's why if you have the ability to move from your WhatsApp channel for a clear question that needs to be answered by a human, just move it into a voice channel.
Yeah.
So simple. You don't have this customer stuck in the channel. Get him out of that channel and move him into the voice channel. It's a simple thing in the world. And those things are starting, but certainly not completely there yet. The other thing sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
The other thing that I predicted two things that just did not happen at all in 2015 for the 2020. One of them was IoT. I was expecting IoT to make a much bigger step forward in consumer supporting activities, right? So the ability for my fridge or my laundry or my washing machine, to communicate with the factory to tell them, hey, this is going wrong, or what about this, etc. It's such a simple thing. Every piece of equipment I have is IoT enabled, but really nothing happens, right? So yeah, I've got UV lights and I turn them on and off, but there's so much more from a possibility perspective with IoT that you could think about. Now I'm surprised how slow that is going. And when I look at the contact center, there's really no sensory derived information that's entering the contact center except for alarm systems. And that has been going on way before IoT was even a thing, right? So it's hardly IoT if you think about it. And the other one that I expected much more from was virtual reality and augmented reality. And it didn't happen really. So we built a platform, we looked at it, and we had a lot of fun with it. And we thought there was a complete use case. Also, actually, a little bit in combination with engaging with natural language, so conversational AI. And it didn't really happen. They didn't take off. And we're a bit surprised that we couldn't find an actual use case for customers. They loved it. And they said, oh my God, this is fantastic. And would you ever buy it? No. So that's kind of a downer on an excitement around the platform. The same goes a little bit for Echo and all these tools, right? So they are still the most asked question to Amazon or Google Home are, what time is it? What's the weather? Tell me the joke of the day. Sing me a song. So that's the conversation we're having with a piece of equipment in your household. And they have not made the step to full conversational support systems. Because I think and the example I always give is that when I'm in my house, I should be able to talk to anything that is enabled in my house and ask them to change my ticket from 10 o'clock in the morning to a later time and tell me what time availability there is so I can make a choice. And that simple query is not even possible today. So we have some steps to make. So not on the hype cycle, it's across that, but we have some steps to make conversational AI a true element in the consumer world as well as it is in the business world today.
Yeah, I'm just picking up on a couple of points, but I do think the technologies aren't just relating to your WhatsApp story and your async. Actually, recently, as in this week, I've been sorting out my cell or mobile number for my 21-year-old daughter who has left college, living in another country and working. I'm still sorting out her mobile contact, by the way. But I got channel hop from live chat into WhatsApp. That's great. So WhatsApp or that channel hop was implemented like we would have took IVR 15, 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. What also become more frustrating when I got into the async world, WhatsApp, when I could wait for the agent maybe for 50 minutes, soon as the agent responded, if I didn't respond within 5 minutes, I was asked a question for conversation. So I'm thinking, why are you doing this to me? Why do I? And it happened twice where I actually had something happened. I had to jump on a meeting and a call, didn't look at the phone, and then realized the conversation on WhatsApp goes. I had to start over again. And I'm thinking, why?
Yeah, that's like applying a chat paradigm to a messaging channel. Messaging is not real time. So it can be, but it's always based on the utterance of the communication between the two parties or the multi-party. Chat is much more real time than a lot of people think, right? So I have a very low patience when somebody pops up on a window and say, we want to chat. And I say, yes. I've got like voice tolerance. So within 20, 30 seconds, I expect somebody to be chatting on the other side of the line. And with me, not with 17 other people, but with me. And that hardly happens. So chat is disappearing, I think, from that world slowly. And it will be replaced by WhatsApp. But if you see practices like that, then we have some steps to make, right? There's a certain level of reluctance around messaging frameworks and channels still today. That surprised me a little bit, and I think it's good for us and good for customers if we get over that hump and allow that to be much more of a primary channel event. That being said, you need to. One of the things that we've done all the time, and it's kind of an old way of buying technology as well. You buy box after box after box, and then you figure out how to work with them. But that's how a lot of enterprises still look at their channels as well, right? The voice channel, that's the contact center. We'll let them worry about that. They've got an IVR, fine. Then we got messaging, which is is that a contact center channel? Is that a marketing channel? Where do we put this? But there's a new front door, and then you got the branch office. You got a front door there. You've got all kinds of stuff, and they're all treated as a singular channel. And because of that, when a person decides to enter an email channel and you get an email back that says no reply, and you're kind of stuck there already. I think one of the most offending and frustrating things is to get an email you can't reply to. So what you do is you start calling. So you're just provoking messaging. You're just provoking communication in the wrong way. I chose to go into the email channel. It might not be the one you want to have because it's seemingly more expensive or whatever it is. But I think it's kind of unprofessional to just shut the door on me and say no reply. And I can't go anywhere else. So I'm already frustrated when I start looking for another channel to find my story, right? Same happens in WhatsApp. The same happens on the website. So we treat them like little silos, and it's hard for customers to get out of that. When we talk about experience orchestration, one of the abilities is to seamlessly move through that channel world, right? That should be possible and actually very easy. And then on top of that, I think that when you think about front doors, and we work with the intelligent customer front door for quite a while.
I was going to mention ICFD, but that was 15 years ago, Merijn.
One of the better acronyms we had, actually, I think. But it's surprising to see that if you call customers, or enterprise in general, to be clear, is that their IVR is clearly not gone through a CMO rubber stamp, right? It's an important front door through which quite a few of your customers enter your company, and it's confusing and it's annoying, and you get locked in self-service if you don't know your account number or elements like that. People then start shouting agent, or swearing themselves to an agent, which also works quite well. But that's not what a CMO would like to see as an entry point into your enterprise. So my advice to a lot of customers as well is that although your IVR is not something you necessarily want to grow or make bigger, it's still a very important front door. So make sure that's up to date with what you're doing on WhatsApp, with what you're doing on your website, the lingo you're using, the voice that you choose as your brand, the choices that you provide as well. I still believe that conversationally, the IVR is developing and getting better and better and better. The recognition is getting much more accurate. But there are still really good IVRs that just have a simple numbering system, 1, 2, and 3. And that's about it. And maybe a layer underneath, but clear, concise, to the point, you know where to go. And you don't forget by choice number 5, what is it actually that they said at number 2? Is that more applicable? Then you go through the rounds again. And so those old practices, and you made a company out of that, are still around, and that's surprising to me a little bit. And we still get customers, and you call them, and there's no choice number 1 because somebody in IT decided to delete it because we didn't use that product anymore. So you call in and say, well, for this and this, not push number 2. Oh, I missed number 1, I guess. So you hang up, call again. Well, that's where your short abandoned calls are coming from, because of the unclarity about your initial entry into your IVR. Old news, I know, but surprising to see that the revamping of your IVR on a regular basis is really crucial. Make sure that the front door environment you create is seamless, is orchestrated, actually is an experience in itself.
Yeah, I mean, I think the analogies or the saying is the more things change, the more they stay the same. And I think bringing back some of those mindsets in terms of what we were doing 15, 20 years ago, the front door is obviously extremely important, but I started to use a term, I don't know if anybody else has used it, called transactional AI. So if you don't have the back end element in terms of getting data, understanding that, not just from an AI, but basic integration, then your front door can be as nice looking as you want it to be, but the customer experience still is going to be pretty goddamn poor.
That's true. It is also, by the way, so when you think about it from a conversational perspective, if you think about using natural language to have that conversation, and the initial question is, how can I help you today? Which is a good question. I've learned myself the hard way that it's not always easy to explain what you're actually trying to resolve or trying to pursue or do. And if you don't, then it becomes a confusing conversation fairly quickly. I'm not saying that there's a better question, but it's worth kind of looking at what that actually means. How do people describe their problems? It's the same. I think that's where like the echoes of this world went wrong, is that they assumed people would speak in the same way they search on Google, but you don't, right? So on Google, you're probably more accurate than when you're using speech to search for a problem, plus that you have the ability to then, after your first results, go and deepen or detail it a little bit more, which voice is hard. So you want to do everything in the one sentence, and then especially when you have multiple things that you want to resolve, it becomes a super complex query all of a sudden. That's really hard to understand and actually prioritize in a certain way. I'm sure that we'll get to a point in time where the speech environment will be able to say, hey, listen, what I heard is 4 problems, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we believe that number 1 is probably the best one to start with. Do you agree? So yes, and boom, you get routed. I think we'll get there. And actually, I think we'll get there fairly soon, because the progress we're making is stunning. So, and then conversational AI really becomes a thing for me in spoken conversation as well. Text is a little bit easier, but in spoken conversation as well. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Very good. A couple of things I'm probably running quite a lot, but the conversation is good. So you talked about looking forward, I guess. So we have, I used to love your 20 for 20. So what would your 3 for 30, let's call it that, rather than 30 for 30 be then? What would, you're looking into the future, what are you seeing?
Yeah, so I'm going to put virtual and augmented reality back on the map, combining that a little bit with 5G. Not necessarily from a contact center experience perspective, but certainly from a sales experience perspective, and the ability to leverage anything digital in our world as a communication means to provide tips and tricks on the proximity based on 5G in an augmented and virtual reality world. I think for advertisers and for billboards, but also for road signs, and creates a complete new set of opportunities. So I'm very interested in that. The personal consumer bot, so Google toyed around with it a little bit. With the person making an appointment with a hairdresser, right? And there was a bot. I do think that the ability for me to articulate a desire with bots that work for me, that start doing the search work and the research work and provide me choices that I can choose from, and then do the additional work in the entire billing cycle, will become fairly normal. It's not a secret that I believe that ethics are going to be incredibly relevant going forward, and ChatGPT, but all kinds of AI solutions that we've seen so far, I think require a much more ethical view on what it is that we're doing with technology, how we want to use technology, where it serves humankind, and how do we make sure that we control it that way as well, right? I'm not a person that is afraid that Skynet will fall upon us in 2050 or whenever the singularity will happen. But I do think that if we don't do anything about it, it's going to be a useless exercise. And so from an ethical perspective, I think that it's time that companies hire people that know their way around in that space without becoming kind of fluffy and abstract, but are able to articulate ethical requirements that I would have as an enterprise when I use technology. At the same time, we vendors should also think about, how do we want our customers to use our technology, right? How do we make sure we're not using it in a discriminatory way or elements like that we actually do not want to see? There are some companies out there that already made statements around ethics in their product set that I find mind-blowing and very profound. So I'm hopeful that it will become part of valuation and will become part of normal business practice. It also for me means that majors at universities that are focused much more on language skills, on philosophy skills, on ethical skills, are becoming relevant again, right? So I think coding will be replaced partly by machines that will do it better and quicker. I think there will always be a human layer on top of that, at least for the foreseeable future. But I do think there will be a kind of a transition towards more alpha-oriented jobs again that are becoming relevant. Not the volume of technology jobs, but there will certainly be ethical officers in company and elements like that. I think that's an important one as well. I expected more from blockchain. I think this is a hype cycle discussion, right? I was incredibly interested in what I think it was the Australian Stock Exchange that was kind of the first one starting a real blockchain project. And I kind of pulled out of that because there's not a project that you can't really do in another way yet, right? So the use cases that we see that are described can be served in multiple ways. You don't necessarily ultimately need the blockchain to do that. But I do think that a blockchain in itself is a future element for privacy regulations, the ability for me to own my own data. I could even be a non-fungible token in that entire world and deliver parts of my data set to an enterprise to serve me in their business. But then after they're done, take it back into my blockchain and become private again. So I think those are interesting elements that will require different ways of thinking about personalization, right? I think personalization has always been seen, hey, if I know your name, I can pronounce it and I know where you live, that's not personalization. That's more creepy than personalization. Personalization is really trying to figure out, how can I help you best, right? What is it that you would require to drive the outcome that you have in mind? Also kind of creepy, but way less than doing a merger of names or elements like that. That's what I think you need to learn how to do, and you have to do that in real time. And as everything will go to continuous, I think that will be going continuous as well. And I think that's a great step forward in privacy regulations, in personalization at the same time. So I think that's a win-win situation. And I do believe a blockchain could actually be an instrument to help that. But I'm still waiting for the use cases to actually do that for us and allow us to see the blockchain as an actual added value. I thought about CX currencies and mainly in line with the cryptocurrencies that we see. And I must say that the volatility right now and the uncertainty and the elements around it from a fraud perspective, make myself retract a little bit on that one. I'm not sure whether that's really time already and how this will go, but certainly something to keep an eye on as well.
Brilliant. We're going to have to revisit, hopefully not in 3030, but and we will certainly pick some of this up again. As always, Merijn, it's been brilliant chatting to you. Wealth of knowledge. I could sit, chat, and listen all day. Just one thing, well, two short things before we go. Recently, a mutual friend of ours passed away, so I'd like to dedicate this episode of this podcast to Damien Kelly, who worked with, and I admired a lot. So I'd love to dedicate that to Damien.
I think that's a great idea. I think that Damien was one of those people. He was just a really good human being to work with, to party with, to travel with, to tinker with, to think with. And they're very rare. And when somebody like that falls away, and I've gone through some personal loss as well. Yeah, you feel for his family and you feel for the world that somebody that was driving change is not there anymore, and it's painful. So I think it's a great idea to do that.
Yeah. Sadly missed on many levels. So, but I certainly would have loved to pick up again, Merijn. Possibly the next time in face to face. I know you're back from the US. You spent 10 or 12 years. You're now back home in the Netherlands. I'm assuming that's home for at least the foreseeable.
Yeah, it's gonna be. As you can see behind me, the wall there is super old. So I bought an old house, and that requires renovation probably for the rest of my life. So actually, the wall is older than the United States of America, which is what I tell my colleagues when. So
that goes down well on the West Coast, I'm sure.
I'll be here for sure.
Very good. Listen, we'll definitely get back together again, Merijn. But for now, Merijn to Booij, thank you very much. Love talking to you, and we'll chat again.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time.